Hello everyone, we are here to talk about some of the customer requested enhancements that are being added as part of Clarity 16.0.0. There are quite a few enhancements that are being made, which is a direct result of the interaction with the customers. In this release, we are introducing the boards and pick list for custom object. There is going to be a new job to delete job log entries. There is the addressing of the quick tabbing performance, removing of the confirmation message when switching between views, added the forecast and forecast variance by period for financial plans, standardizing of the investment naming, cross-object grid enhancements, and smart filters. So let's talk about each one of those. But prior to that, why is this important? So the customer requested enhancements is based on a direct interaction with the customers during various product management initiatives. Um, these are direct results of either the project management office hours that happens on a weekly basis or based on our monthly roadmap review or monthly design studio, as well as some of the items that were deemed as quick fixes done during the monthly innovation calls. So again, direct feedback, direct interaction between product management team and customers. And based on those, we were able to get a lot of these requests directly into the product. The first is the boards and pick list. So starting this release, you will now have the option to see the data in a board view. You will also have the option to define pick list for your object, the custom object itself. The board layout and pick list functions will work very similar to how it does in projects ideas and CIT, and views can be saved with the board configuration. So it's a very similar functionality, but now just available in custom objects. We, up till now in the product, always used to have a job called remove job logs and library. This job used to essentially take the input of just the number of days, and based on the number of days would go ahead and then try to delete every uh, uh, either the report type or the job based on the number of anything that's older than that number of days. We had a direct feedback from the customers that one of the reasons why they do not use that job, hence resulting in a large amount of data in the system and directly impacting the performance, was the fact that the job was not selective enough. It was essentially deleting log information for all the past value of all the jobs that are out there, and they wanted selective job execution. So starting this release, we are introducing another job, which would work similar to the current job, but it'll take two required parameters. The first one is going to be the job report type, and it'll accept a multi-value job names. So essentially you can pick one or multiple job types, and we will then only delete those selected job for the age that you specify, anything older than whatever age you specified to us. This job will be incompatible with the existing job, and the customers will then now moving forward see both of these jobs available to them. But hopefully using this new job, they are now able to delete the data that they no longer want while preserving the data that they do want to keep. Several of our customers, specifically in SQL Server, or that were using SQL Server as our database and on-premise, had reported a defect in the product where when they were populating the data and tabbing through on a frequent, or I should say on a fast manner, they were noticing that in certain cases, the data was getting lost. And the primary reason for that was that the way Clarity works is everything is in an auto save and auto refresh. So as soon as you populate a data, we would automatically save the value in the database and then immediately do a refresh to to show you the impact of that change on the rest of the fields in the same screen. The result of that was that if you're going too fast, you could potentially lose some of the record data that you populated because by the time we save it and then come back and display it, the data could be overwritten. To address that, we are now making a change as to instead of immediately reading and then refreshing the screen, we will wait for the user interaction to pause for 500 milliseconds. And a user interaction is either user clicking or user typing on the screen. So if the user is not doing anything and just staring the screen for about 500 milliseconds, we will immediately save, refresh the data, and bring it back. So by delaying that, we are able to address that specific defect that was there. And again, this was only observed for customers on SQL Server. Another feedback that we got from our customer was essentially it was deemed to be very annoying that if I am on a grid layout of any object and I changed my view, and if that view had some modifications done to it, then it'll always prompt me to ask me if I want to discard those changes or if I want to save the changes. This was done with the rightful thinking that we didn't want the customers to lose any of their modifications, so we always alerted them. However, over the period of time, it became to the point where it became more of a distraction and an annoyance because customers know that they're modifying, and if they're modifying something, the view name does become from a regular letter to an italicized letter, indicating that something was modified. And that visual indicator was sufficient for them that they did not need an additional display of save or discard the changes. So starting 16.0.0, that message will no longer be displayed to our customers. Now, when a customer is in a view, and if they modify the layout of the view or modified anything within that view, then the view name will be italicized, which would be the visual indicator. When they navigate to another view in the same object, then we will proceed with the changes without prompting them saying if they want to save or discard. Another feedback from the customer we had was they wanted to see the forecast and forecast variance in the financials, specifically the cost plan and budgets. Just a reminder, the forecast value is essentially the actual amount for the fiscal period that is already completed plus the forecasted amount for the future fiscal periods. And the variance is just the difference between the planned cost and the forecasted amount. Customers were not able to see these two values when they were within the financials, and now this is available to them. These two values were there in the financial plans module that existed in the system long time ago, and customers are moving away from that module to this new financial models that allows them to see cost plans, budgets, actuals, and benefits. The total value for the forecast and forecast variance will still be controlled based on the view setting if you're seeing the sum of periods or the grand total settings. So that still works the same as the other attributes. We are also introducing a new attribute within the cost plan. This is based on a scenario where the customer said that today the system automatically determines how the forecast value is calculated based on if the period is in the past or completed, then the actuals are used, whereas in the future, the forecast is used. However, certain times the customer don't want that to keep changing based on the day, because if the month switches over, then the day changes and the value changes. They wanted that to be locked just so that they can visualize and compare it. To address that scenario, we have now introduced the new field called forecast cutoff date. This value can be populated at the cost plan instance level itself, so not at the details, but at the cost plan level. Once this value is populated, then the calculation for the forecast is based on this date rather than the current date. So if I populate this value for a last period or something, then the actual amount will be calculated up till this forecast cutoff date, and then the forecast value will be used after this cutoff date. This date is only available in the modern UX, and it is not a required field. This is just an additional value that is available for the customers to view their data. In the past, we used to have the naming of our certain investments, such as projects and ideas. The names as well as the ID for those were hard coded, which means that in the previous release, when we introduced the ability to relabel an attribute name, these two, the name and ID for project and idea, were not getting relabeled because they were hard coded. So starting this release, we've addressed that. We have standardized the names for projects, ideas, custom investment types, and we've provided the ability that if you rename the name or idea using the attributes for the investment, then that will be reflected in the properties and everywhere else for uh, these respective objects. As part of addressing this, you can see the standard names that we've done. So for the project that used to be just called name, we have now renamed it to project name. And for investment ID, we call it as project ID for the project object only. Here is the screenshot that displays the same as to how it'll appear in the modern UX grid layout, where the project name and the subject name will be displayed. Cross-object grids were introduced few releases ago. Cross-object grid, such as in the to-do grid or the staffing grid that was introduced, allowed you to see data across multiple objects, such as in the to-do, you can see the investments data, the task data, and the to-do data all in the same grid layout. However, there was one restriction there, which was that the arrangement of the columns were tied to their container group. For example, the attributes for a task had to remain within the task container or the task area, and you can reorder them within that task area. Customers asked us to enhance that, saying that they want to have the ability to be able to move those respective attributes out of their group and arrange them to see the data as they would like to see it. So if they want to see the task name, then the investment name, then the to-do name, then the rest of the task and the investment values, they should be able to do that. Starting this release, we have now provided the ability where you can drag an attribute out of their container, object container, into arranging it however you would like to see the respective data. Once the changes are made, you can save that in your view and then always access it as needed. Introducing smart filters. This is a long time ask from our customers, where when they are defining the data they want to see within a grid, they don't want to hard code to their respective names, but instead want to be able to define their views specific to whoever is either logged into the system, or define the time periods based on relative dates rather than a hard-coded dates. As well as have some smart actions, such as when I'm creating a new timesheet, I should be able to copy my previous values or copy the previous timesheets with time. Starting this release, we now have smart filters across Clarity. The smart filters really break down into the current user filter, the smart periods, and smart actions in timesheet. The current user, which is probably going to be the most used filter, is available throughout Clarity application. I'm not going to read every object and the fields or the out-of-the-box fields within that object where this can be used. This is available to you for reference. However, the only thing I would like to call out is that we not only support this for our out-of-the-box field, we also support this for custom fields, provided those custom fields are created based on certain criteria. So again, the smart filter for current user is available for out-of-the-box and custom fields. The criteria for the custom fields is as follows. Any custom lookup that is created should have been created with the object resource. The primary ID for that query should have the resource ID, and that's what should be the hidden key for that lookup. And then when you populate that to create an attribute, you should populate its API alias so that it is available in the modern UX. And once all of these criteria is met, then you can have the ability to filter for that custom field using the smart filter for current user. So any customers that have lookups defined this way can right away be able to filter using the current user field. Smart dates have been introduced primarily for the ability to see the data in TSV based on dynamic or relative periods rather than a hard-coded value. The dynamic date option in the settings are available as follows: that the start period will have the option to select current period, prior period, start of the current year, or the start of that current type, which would be for a TSV, cost plan, benefit, and budgets. The same for the end period. You can select the current period, next period, end of the current year, or finish of that specific type, such as the TSV, cost plan, benefit plan, and budget. It is available in TSV, cost plan, budgets, benefits, roadmaps, sorry, not for roadmaps, hierarchy, staffing, and widgets. So the smart dates are available in all of these objects except for roadmap. The dynamic dates are based on fiscal period from the default entity. All right, with that, let's see the product in action. So I'm here in Clarity 16.0.0. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my custom object and show you the board views that is now available. So funding source is my custom object that I've created. I've populated some data for it. And now you can see that there is a new link available to me for boards. When I click on that, I can see the data as a board view. I can drag and drop these as I need, very similar to other board functionality. And if I go to the view option, I have the ability to manage my pick list. Next, let's go into the administration side. And in here, let's look at the reports and jobs, and let's see the new job that we've added. So you can see in my environment, I have two jobs that are available to me. The remove job logs and report entries. This used to exist. This is the existing one that only took the age date for either the job or for the report and would then delete anything older than that. The new one has a similar name, but it has by type added at the end. When I go in here, you can see that I have now the parameter to select one or multiple either jobs or reports. So I can select any of those options in here. And once done so, I can add that to the list, specify the date, and then I can go ahead and run this to delete only these selected job logs or reports that I have. Next, I'm going to go to my modern UX and let's look at in project list. Let's see how moving between different views will work. So by coming in my project list by default, I am in my default view. As you can see, the name is in a regular syntax. But if I move some of these around, so I'm going to have my manager, start and finish as the first few columns. I can see the data. You can see that as I made change to my view, the view name changed to an italicized. Now, if I navigate to any other, such as a financial summary, in the past, an alert would come saying, you made changes, do you want to save it or not? Now, I can just easily navigate to the new view and it'll display the data to me without prompting me or alerting me. The understanding is that you can see that it is in italicized, and when you're navigating away, that means you are intentionally making a conscious decision to navigate losing your changes. Right? The next is I'm going to go into the to-do, and in my to-do, this is one of the first places where we had the cross object grid. And as you can see by default, I have data coming from to-dos, tasks, common investment, and project listed in here. In previous releases, if I wanted to rearrange all of these, I could only move these columns within the object container. So I could reorder this within to-dos, I could reorder the task within the task container, and so on. However, now I'm no longer confined to my object container, but I can change it as I want to see the data. In that case, if I want to see the investment name first, I can easily drag it out of its container. Then I can add the task phase. I can add the task name. And I can then see my to-dos. So you can see I've easily dragged it out of their respective containers. The remaining fields remain in the previous container. So the rest of the task, the start and finish for the task are in the second task container. So now I have the ability to move the data outside of their respective object containers. If I don't like it, I can obviously go back to my view, or I can save it if I do like this. In this case, I will just go back to my regular view, and it's now back to how it was before. Next, let's look at the staffing. And in here, it's the same. This is the another place where we introduce the cross object grid to be able to see the data across different investments. When I look at the columns, I have staffing and common investments and so on. In this case too, as you can already see, I have rearranged where the staffing values are there. Then there is the common investments, and then the projects and so on. I can easily move these around as I need to see the data necessary. Next, I'm going to go into my project. And in this, I'm going to show you the financials, which is the actual, the forecast and the forecast variance dates. So for that, let's go into my, sorry, let me first make sure I'm in the right view. I'm going to go into the cloud computing compliance. In here, I'm going to go into financials. And for the cost plan, I'm going to look at the plan based on assignments. And you can see the two new fields are added in my view, the forecast and forecast variance. I have those values for totals, as well as I have those for the respective periods that's been added. The value, let's drill it down to respective or just two periods for our demo purpose. I'm going to trim it down to just September as the start period, and I'm going to trim it to October as the end period. So now I'm just seeing the two. So in this case, both of these are has periods that are already completed. So by default, you can see that the forecast value is essentially the actual value because it is the past period. And then the variance is cost minus the forecast. And that's the same for both the September and October. But if I wanted to not see the actual value, but truly see what was the forecasted value for these past periods, I can do that by going to cost plans and now populating this new field called forecast cutover. And I'm going to populate this for ending in August. All right. So now that the value is set to August, that means for September and October, I should see the forecasted value and not the actual values for my forecast field. So let's go back in. And again, let's look at the two time periods. And you can see in that case, my forecasted value was my cost. So it is different from the actual value. So now it is taking based on the date, the cutoff date. The forecast is now calculated rather than using the actual date or the current date. All right. Next, let's go look at some of the smart filters across the product. So first, I'm going to go into the project list. By default, as you can see, I can see all the projects that I have access to. However, one of the key things customers asked is that I want to be able to, when I log in, just see my projects, and I don't want to hard code that to my name. I want to be able to set it to a relative value of the user that is logged into the system. So for demo purpose, I have created a view called My Projects. And when I go to that respective view, I'm now only seeing projects where I'm a project manager. And this is possible because if I look at the views, I am now using the new smart filter called current user. This way, whoever I log in as soon as I go to the My Project view, I would only see projects that I am as the manager for. Right? Let's go look at some of the other places. So I'm going to next go into the cloud computing compliance. Let's look at in the finance to see some of the relative dates. So let's go into the finance first and let's look at our cost plan. So right here, it is showing me just for the two periods. But if I wanted to see relative dates, so the dates that I'd hard coded, but let's say maybe instead of these two hard dates, I can see now the dates based on the current period, prior period, start of the current year, or the cost plan start. So let's just set it to the current year start, and the end period can be either the current next period or current end year. So let's just say the current period. So now I have picked relative dates to see my financial data rather than either the cost plan value or a fixed period value, right? So now it's starting and it ends in the current period, which is this month, November. Let's look at another place, which is under assignments. That's another place where relative date become very important. So my current project is a very long project. It's really spanning for 40 period. So it's a very long project. But I don't want to be able to, I don't want to go look at every past month and scroll to the current period or hard code a specific value. I want that every time I come in here, I only see the specific period. So I can now filter for that. I only want to work with the prior period and the next period are my only two date I want to see, right? So past month, current month, and next should be the only three periods that I want to work with. I don't want to see all the old other data. I can easily do that by populating those two values. And now I see just the 3 months, the past, the current, and the next. Right, continuing on, the next place I'm going to go is into staffing. That's another place where the smart filter or the smart period is very important. If I am the resource manager that is trying to look at all the staff and all their allocations and etc across all the projects, that itself is a lot of data. Now for me to then either hard code each time or scroll through all of these different values, I want to be able to maybe just see what was all the staff allocations for everything this year up till now, or be able to see what are the future for this remaining year, what allocation needs to, or needs to be done. I can do that by easily defining my time periods. In the first view that I have defined my start period to be the start of the current year. That's another one of the available smart period. And it ends in the current period. So every time I come into this view, it'll always show me just this specific period, start of this year till the current period automatically. And I'm only seeing the data from January to November. If I want to see for the remaining what allocation needs to be done, I have another view that is created for the pending, and that's just showing me the two periods, which is the current and the next. And as you suspected, the start period is set to the current period and the end period is set to the end of the current year. So it automatically picked up that there's only two periods that is left based on the current date. All right, let's continue on to now. Let's log in as another user and look at some more smart filters for the current user. So in this case, I'm going to log in as a regular user that might have some to-dos assigned to them. So under the to-dos, by default, when I go in, I see tons of to-dos that's assigned to everybody where I have the access to view. But if I always wanted to see just my own to-dos, I can do that by using the new smart filter. In this case, I've created a view with that filter, but the filter is the owner is current user. When I specify that, only my to-dos are now displayed. So this allows me to just see my data as needed. Right, let's continue on with one more, which is where I can also use the same smart filter based on a custom lookup. So in this case, I'm going to go into, I'm logging as the strategic sponsor called Barb. And when I go in as her and I go into my project list, I have a predefined view that says show me only those projects where I am the strategic sponsor. And then strategic sponsor is a custom lookup that has been defined. And you can see because that custom lookup was defined using the criteria that is needed, I can filter for the current user here. So let's quickly just glance at that also. If I log in as the admin and I go back into my administration screen and I go into lookups, This is the lookup that is being leveraged in that project object. As you can see, first criteria, the object is set to resource. Second criteria, the ID is the resource ID. The hidden key is the ID. So once those criteria is met and I add that attribute with its API key enabled, I can leverage this for smart filter. And this concludes this section. Thank you.